Hey, you remember the movie Field of Dreams?
I do. I do indeed. Yeah. Kind of creeps me out a little bit. I think I was like 10 or 11 when it came out. That stage when movies still, everything could kind of sort of be a horror movie, right? We got people who aren't alive anymore coming out of the corn, flashbacks to Children of the Corn, all of which is to say, yes, I remember Field of Dreams.
If you build it, they will come. That was a pretty popular thing for a long time. And frankly, it's not true for higher ed anymore.
Mm-mm. Not at all. Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
Nope.
Hello and welcome to Rock Enroll, the podcast on strategic marketing and enrollment management in higher education. We hope you enjoy it and don't forget to subscribe. This episode is part one of a two-part series on the current state of higher education.
Yeah, just in terms of structures and programs launched and all that. Yeah, no, a lot of folks have built it and they haven't come. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. How many billboards have been put up kind of for the sake of drawing new attention and bringing in new prospects in reality? How much has changed because of it? I think a lot has changed in the landscape in terms of what's working and not. And one of the key things that I think is really important, and as we dig into some of the data and like what's happening right now, something to keep in mind is that what has traditionally been considered a best practice might not be so anymore, and that's an important key. You can't just do the same old and hope for the better results.
I feel like we almost need like a best practice graveyard at this point, especially when it comes to enrollment marketing. I'm often reminded, this is a tough one to say, but in Texas, they have this saying, so I'm told, if all you've ever done is all you ever do, all you ever got's all you're ever going to get, which is this thought of, to your point, like these best practices that we probably need to lay down a little bit, looking at you, test name, list buying and that sort of thing. These are still viable tactics, but maybe not, building the entirety of your enrollment marketing enterprise around it anymore.
So looking at some of the interesting data that's come out recently, I think that there have been some interesting stats. One bit of info that was released recently from the National Clearinghouse was, higher ed fell even further, 2.7% in the fall of 2021. And if you look across the 2 years, basically the 2-year decline from fall of 2019 to 2021, that decline was 5.1%, or about 938,000 students. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's a human tragedy. I mean, it really is that we have lost 1 million. And statistically, we know that of that million that we've lost, a lot of them are probably gone for good. Not all of them, certainly. I don't want to make it seem like it's a hopeless case, but for too many individuals, there's just a window of time in life when it's right to pursue an education before other obligations kind of swallow you up. And so, like I said, that's a human tragedy. The other side of it too is so many folks, we know this is true, just got gobbled up by kind of COVID era obligations with kids and concerns about safety in other areas. But I also think a lot of folks have been kind of drawn back into a hot labor market where wages are high. We've seen this movie before when that happens, when economic winds shift, the folks who don't have a degree statistically still are just in a much more vulnerable position. So again, it just kind of speaks to that tragedy of what we're seeing.
I think what is fascinating is that the freshman class in particular, it was 9.2% smaller compared to pre-pandemic levels in fall of 2019. I mean, that's staggering.
It is. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes I learned in public health school. Some attribute it to Aristotle, some attribute it to Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai, but just basically says, tell me how a person died and I shall tell you how they lived, right? If we look at these patterns that we're seeing in terms of this drop in numbers and the institutions that are being particularly hard hit, like you said, public 2-year institutions, community colleges, public 4-year regionals, some of these smaller, more service-oriented liberal arts colleges with kind of lower endowments, but really kind of mission driven, they're the ones that are getting hit the hardest. And what that tells us is they, to your point, were living to serve these audiences that themselves have just been gobsmacked by the pandemic, by all these economic changes that we have going on. So it's interesting when you look at the data. It tells a story. It kind of confirms a story that we already knew, that institutions that were kind of, just politely say, serving the served, seem to be holding up pretty well. The more, frankly, necessary mission-driven side of higher education that our country is going to really depend on, really took a hit. And that to me is a little scary moving forward.
Are you seeing any upside to any of this, Dana?
Oh, you know me, I'm Mr. Brightside. I do believe that, we are always in a state of disaster, and always have been. Higher ed has always been facing challenges. This era is just particularly hard, but there's always a brighter day ahead. And I think in terms of good news that we're seeing out there, we also saw this week that Common App released their data on what they've been seeing in this application cycle through the end of December 2021. And hey, good news, right? 13% increase, about 1 million total applicants through Common App, which is pretty exciting. One kind of little piece of nuance in there. Now, of course, we know that when students use or applicants use Common App, they tend to apply to more institutions. This is actual applicants. This doesn't mean like more applications, but an actual increase in applicants, which is pretty great. Flip side of that, though, is that application volume itself actually up about 20%.
I was looking at some of that, and I thought one of the interesting things that stood out to me is the minority and first-gen applicants. Those are some really key areas. And I thought an interesting data point from that they released was that underrepresented minority applicants increased by 17% over the 2019-2020 year. First-gen applicants increased by 21%. I think that's very promising when we're starting to see a lot more of the first-gen students, being willing, that maybe recognizing the fact that without a college degree, they're not going to get as far in life, maybe as they hope to. So, I think that's one bright spot in some of this, is that we are seeing those increases by the minority and the first gen students.
But I think the other thing that we're learning here is that when we look at overall enrollment data, like we just did, okay, so maybe enrollments are now down 1 million. Common App applications are up, and the number of applicants using Common App are up. That tells me that, Common App is really starting to gain even more market share in a declining market segment. And so if you're swimming in those waters of undergraduate admissions, it's really becoming more and more compelling to make sure that you are in some sort of, if it's not Common App, it's one of the other kind of aggregate systems. That ease of application, that ease of flexibility between institutions, that's really what applicants are looking for. They're looking for that kind of Amazon level customer experience from the get-go, including when they're applying to an institution. So it makes a ton of sense.
It's important that they remove all obstacles, basically.
Exactly.
If they're continuing to put out, PDF applications and things like that, download, fill out long form, and then, scan, upload back, that's just, it's not happening anymore. It shouldn't be the case. And those types of aggregate sites just make things a lot easier for the students. And so that's naturally where they're going to be drawn to when they're completing their applications.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to do what you should never do and refer back to my own experience. But back in the early 90s, when I was filling out my college apps, even by the early 90s, my high school had the IBM PS2s and we were on WordPerfect 5.1 with the blue screens and all that. I had never touched a typewriter in any kind of serious way. And then I had to fill out a college application that required typing, which is to say I had to acquire 4 or 5 paper copies of that application so I could figure out how to use that darn typewriter. I feel like, to your point, Josh, that the fillable PDF is going to become, if not for a lot of kids, the typewriter. And how many folks are filling things out on their phone as well? Very frustrating experience. Try to fill out a form that hasn't been optimized for that experience. It's like I said, just get rid of that friction, make that easy glide path, make this decision as simple as possible, and really be able to start that student experience, that relationship they have with you as being one where you have thought through their obstacles and their needs, and you're kind of making this just a little bit easier on them, or certainly no harder than it has to be. So
I think to that point, at Vision Point, we do quite a bit of we run a lot of campaigns for colleges and universities all throughout the country. And it's really interesting sometimes with not just the clients that we work with, but when we're doing research on competitor schools and kind of how they're doing things, we sometimes see that There's a great optimized mobile experience on the landing page, sometimes even the full university side. I would say, who knows, maybe even most of them at this point are mobile optimized. But then when you finally get to that point where it's the application, you cross over into that other system, usually an way outdated system in some cases. And it's no longer a friendly mobile experience. You're suddenly trying to figure out, like, how do I even navigate this? It's near impossible to do on your phone when, I have a teenager at home, 14-year-old, and he does everything on his phone or his, devices of some kind. If he's not doing it on his phone or some kind of game system, it's not happening. It's not something that he doesn't think to go to the computer to do that type of research and so forth. He uses his phone for it.
It's fascinating you say that, because you're right. The application is absolutely part of the student experience, and people don't realize that, but it's not some administrative exercise. And there does need to be at least some continuity between, what it reminds me of? If you've ever been to an IKEA and you go to the top floor of the IKEA, right? You go through the front door, they're shuttling you upstairs. You go and it's like living, there's just all these living rooms and bedrooms, and it's like these fictional Scandinavian people's lives that you're walking into. Kids' room, parents' room, bathroom, kitchen, all this. It's all kind of laid out really cool. You sit on that sectional and like, gosh, I love this sectional. Oh, it's this much. This is great. Okay. You look at the tag and there's a little number on it. Tells you, okay, great. You write it all down on your little piece of paper. You're walking through, again, somebody's house and like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Gosh, I wish I could just move in here. You go through that little trail that they put you through, and then they cast you down into the bowels of hell, right? Like you have to then go down into this warehouse level on the next floor. And like theoretically, they've told you where everything you need is, but you're going to get this like industrial cart, and you're with, there's all these other people who don't know where they're going, and they're lost pushing these industrial carts in front of you. And you got to pull the boxes out and no one's helping you. And it's just totally strange. Then you get it out. It's such a diametrically opposed experience. And I feel like it's that way in higher ed enrollment marketing these days in particular, of all the work that we do to entice students, the campus visits, the touch points, the lead nurture, et cetera. We get them all there, and then you shut them off into this application, and it's a real schlock. I mean, there's nothing we can do about the FAFSA. That's kind of beyond our control. But, those areas that you can control, really making them, again, part of the student experience from day one. I think it's just so critical. And then, of course, hopefully you've piled up all those leads like firewood. What do you got to do now? You have to figure out who to admit, and then you've admitted them. And then you hope the ones that you admitted actually show up, right? And so that's all about yield.
Yeah, you start hoping as much as you can that your class really will look as strong as it did when you were watching the leads coming through. It's fascinating because with several of our clients and really with others that I've spoken with throughout the industry, I'm seeing a lot of some interesting trends in terms of maybe the top of funnel looks great. Maybe they're getting in tons of leads. Those inquiries, not a problem. Maybe organic, maybe some paid ads coming in, some of the inquiries and so forth. And maybe even sometimes they can get them to apply. Not always. That can be a challenge in and of itself. But, often they even get them through to the application stage. It's really at that point forward and kind of seeing like, all right, are they actually going to show up to class? Are they going to log in, on that first day? And when we're seeing pretty significant drops with some schools around the country, not a client, but I talked with a school recently that saw a near 20% drop in one of their markets because of just shifts in the trends. And in that same market, was looking at another school and they also saw a drop, not quite 20%, but another drop in that same market. So, I mean, it really does vary.
Was that a drop in applications or a drop in yield?
Drop in yield. They were getting the applications, but it was just people not coming through and yielding on that first day.
It's funny. We said last year, we said at Vision Point that 2021 was going to be the year of yield. And that certainly played out for a lot of our clients. The folks who we helped with, we did yield campaigns, which another way to think about it is just like campaigning for affinity. Like you've already got them applied, but make them feel that strong affinity to you to actually make that commitment. Those are universally very successful. We had couple of clients who actually over-enrolled, which is a problem, but a good problem to have. It does beat the alternative. But I say all this not to just humble brag, but actually I was just kind of a straight up brag. But to think about, 2021 was the year of yield. The 2020s are the decade of yield. Yeah. This is where we spent the previous 10 years trying to just get them to apply, and we still got to do that. But now yield is really where it's at. And so many of the enrollment marketing tactics that we've been utilizing to get them to apply work quite nicely, but it comes to getting them to yield too. So
yeah, and not just even showing up the first day of class freshman year, but also showing up first day of class sophomore year and continuing through that process. Do you want to speak to any of the tactics maybe that you've seen that have worked higher in the funnel that also work at the yield stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So social ads, believe it or not, some specifically, some with messaging that is yield specific, saying, hey, make sure you have filled out this form or submitted this kind of thing. Come back for a second visit to campus. Hey, we really want you to come. But others that, again, just try to build that affinity of trying to give folks a preview of this is what the student experience is going to be like. If it's an undergraduate on-campus experience, just kind of showcasing events that have happened, just kind of give that feel of this is where you belong. Okay. Also getting down into some more sophisticated digital techniques, like addressable IP is one where you're able to, you have a physical address for a location, being able to then figure out other devices that may be present in that house that might be a parent's device, might be a spouse, other influencer, people who are going to influence that prospect or living in that house, sending them different messages to make them feel good about supporting this choice that hopefully that young, or certainly to influence that choice that your prospective student's about to make. These are great tactics, but, and then on the way up too, there's some more kind of emerging, I guess you call them organic ones. We haven't done this for a client yet, but I know there's, some providers that we've talked to that can basically customize, branded swag for an institution. So you open up an online shop that's just for your admitted students. And with their admissions letter, they get a code, and that code is worth however many, if you're the Bulldogs, Bulldog bucks to go, get some of your branded swag. Maybe they want a scarf, like a soccer style scarf. Maybe they want, a visor, who knows what. It's out there. And then they're able to order that through this sort of storefront that's branded to the institution. And then when it arrives, there's all sorts of encouragement, which hashtags to use to show off this swag that they've received. And so it's not just sending somebody a t-shirt or something like that. It's sending them exactly that thing that they said they wanted and then encouraging them to show it off. Once you've kind of committed on Snapchat, once you've committed on Instagram, showing it off to the world, does that mean you're truly committed? I don't know. I don't know how these things work in people's minds these days, but clearly it does. There's some sort of kind of psychological pull there. Really, again, those traditional tactics that got them to apply can still be used, just a slightly different targeting, slightly different messaging. And then there's all sorts of new fun things we can do to build that affinity up and really get them excited about committing.
And one of the things about the channels that you referenced with some of the paid social and some of the programmatic display ads, with the different targeting tactics, those particular types of ads are really great for storytelling. They enable you to tell a story with visual imagery, as well as in some of the text around that ad. And so you're continuing to engage them with the story, and then you're inviting them into the story to participate with you by doing their own social sharing. And that's something that I think that a lot of the really successful schools understand, is that it's all about the institution's story and getting that story out there in creative ways, engaging them throughout the entire process. And also I would just add, if you're an institution thinking about, yield at the moment and tactics that you can try, definitely don't forget your CRM, your email workflows that you can use, but also, a personalized admitted yield microsite, something that a personalized experience where that prospect can engage and kind of continue to affirm some of the reasons why they are interested in that school and why they should make a decision to go there. So 100%, all of those types of tactics are so useful earlier in the funnel, but also in that yield stage. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and please join us next time for part 2.
Vision Point Marketing is an enrollment marketing and enrollment analytics company. We've been around for about 20 years now, working in the higher ed space and only in higher education. We provide solutions to enrollment challenges at every step of the prospective student journey, from brand development and creative campaigns, digital and traditional marketing, strategy work, all the way through to web development, SEO, organic tactics, lead nurture, helping folks get the most out of their CRM, yield campaigns, you name it, all while having a particular focus on data sophistication at every step of the way to know constantly what is working, what's not working, and how to measure our return on investment. We pride ourselves in being able to provide an outstanding client experience that's really rooted in a relentless pursuit of results, in particular enrollment results. We know that enrollments are really, bottom line, the only really metric of success that matters, especially today.